to that, but that's just me. I feel like people should have the freedom to believe what they want because we don't live in a communist society, personally. I feel like we live in America. It's freedom of thought, freedom of speech, freedom of will. Free will is huge, right? Well, the pagans, giving you a little history lesson, were not interested in adopting these other cultures of Christianity. So the Christians just decided, well, we'll just take their religion and their holidays and customs and just like call it something else. And then that way, we can assimilate them into our culture and we can merge it all together, because you cannot force your will upon another person and make them, as a person who's believed something since they were a small child and it's ingrained into their soul, right? Much in the way that people here believe that you have to, accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior and take his communion of his body and blood, or else you're going to absolutely perish in everlasting hell. People have been taught that since they were children here, and they believe it, right? So if someone comes in and contradicts your core beliefs, you're going to have a problem with that, right? Like, so what if the Indian culture came in and invaded the Bible Belt, and they said, Krishna is the only God except for all his other friends. There's lots of gods. This is the way you have to believe it, right? Well, what would you say? Hell no, I'm not going to believe that. And so what if you were sitting there ready to celebrate Christmas that you've always celebrated since your grandparents have celebrated, your great-grandparents, it's the only thing in your cultural tradition that you've ever known, and then you're conquered by a different culture, and they say, nah, you're doing this instead now. Our gods are the gods. I don't know if you watch Game of Thrones. This is a common theme. The new gods and the old, right? It's just whoever's in power gets to decide what god to worship, okay? That's the way the world works, period, all right? So, say the Indian culture came in and forced us to believe some of their beliefs, right? Which most Westerners don't even know the first thing about Indian culture, first of all. So, but think about it. The pagans didn't know anything about Christianity either. This is the analogy I'm making, right? So, what if the Indians came in and told us, you can't celebrate Christmas anymore? Let's fast forward. Let's say it's like 1,000 years from now, and for some reason the Indians decided to not be peaceful and become warlike. And maybe the Christians decided to not be warlike and become peaceful. I don't know. Weirder things have happened, right? So, if someone comes in, say the Indians come in at Christmas time and tell you, you're going to worship Krishna and not Jesus anymore, we're going to call it Christmas. But anyway, that's what you would do to assimilate your culture onto another culture, is take their beliefs and their traditions and then rename them so that your people would comply, right? Because you're tricking them. You're just like, oh, you can have your same customs, and then we'll probably kill most of y'all later or torture you until you decide to comply with our wishes. I don't know how familiar you are with the Tower of London and all the torture devices that the Christians used on others to make them be Christian. But basically they were, tortured people into submission and killed the ones that wouldn't submit. So, and then whoever was left, they were like, fine, we'll just call it Christmas, but it's really the winter solstice. So that's how I feel about that. Hope you enjoyed my story. I can't wait for the hate mail to start coming. But, here's the thing. I'm not trying to force a belief or an opinion on anyone. I'm just saying, educate yourself, right? Knowledge is power. Just because you live in a bubble in a certain part of the world in a certain time period, you need to step back a little bit and look at the big picture, okay? Think about all of the cultures throughout all of humanity, throughout all of the world, different time periods. Think back before 2,000 years ago. Think back 10,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, 30,000 years ago. People's beliefs and thoughts and perceptions change, right? But also, and I will talk about this a little more because I feel like, I don't think all people are ignorant, but I definitely think that the part of the world where I live, people are ignorant because they are taught to be afraid of things they don't understand, right? and to condemn others for believing not like them and not ever, I'll go to the Indian grocery store and ask people about their cultures and their beliefs and their languages and their food. Like, cultures are fascinating. There are other people in the world that are not like you. Go and explore them. There have been lots of different time periods. People have always, human nature has always been the same, right? We all search for a meaning for existence. Why am I here? Why is there so much suffering? What am I going to do when I die? Where did my loved one go when they died? All of these things are questions that people have always asked themselves, right? The ancient Egyptians, for example, were obsessed with death in the afterlife, right? And interestingly enough, the ancient Egyptians had a god named Horus. And Horus was the child, I'm giving you a mythology lesson because I have a degree in this and no one cares. And so the only way I can talk about the things that I've studied is, I'm doing henna, so Merry Christmas. But Horus was a deity in the ancient Egyptian religion. I'm obsessed with Egyptian things. And Horus was the god of Isis and the child of Isis and Osiris, right? He had lots of funny stories about Horus. For example, he was murdered and then after 3 days rose from the dead. He was born on December 25th. Some say he was born of a virgin, but haven't researched that very much. I'm pretty sure Isis was not a virgin. But anyway, there's a lot of fun things about Horus. You might ought to go look him up, Could it possibly be that we also adopted some Egyptian cultural stories and renamed them? I don't know. Maybe. It's worth looking into. Look, and don't think for a second that I'm not trying to tell anybody anything except for that. I hate Christmas. Yep, hate it. Hate it. So anyway, and now let's do this part right here. Why do I hate Christmas? Not because, I'm a sinner and I'm going to burn in hell. It's because I have 3 children and I'm poor. Okay? And last year, my baby asked for a Hatchimal. It was like $400, and I had to buy one on the black market. And, it's so commercialized, Christmas. People have completely lost track of what it's about. As some of you may know, I have some serious mama issues. My mother is the epitome of what disgusts me about Christmas, okay? She has 2 living rooms, 2 dining rooms, and 2 everything, just full of bullshit. It's just bullshit. How many Santa villages do you need to be happy, How big is the hole in your soul that you need like porcelain figurines and glass trinkets that no one can touch that you have to bring out every year in order to be happy? I don't know. I don't even have my Christmas tree up yet. I'm going to teach my kids a little bit differently than my mother taught me, which is that, Christmas is not about presents, and it's not about a bunch of trinkets or sweaters or how many presents are under the tree. My mother grew up very, very poor, and I think she's overcompensating now because she married a rich man, so she's in hog heaven. And so she'll get, the presents underneath my mother's Christmas tree are absolutely ridiculous. When we open presents at her house, which I have vowed to never do again, I'm not participating in any of that bullshit ever again, but in days of yore, when I would go to my mother's house for Christmas, we would literally spend 8.5 hours opening presents. That's how many presents we had. And it wasn't like laid back, oh yeah, everyone open a present, it's great. It was like, it's your turn to open a present. Everybody watch you open a present. And then okay, now to see a reaction. Wonderful. Everyone watch their reaction. Next, your turn, open a present. And my grandmother used to be alive when she was alive. She was 90. Watching that woman open a present, it was more than my patience could handle. Okay, people wonder why I drink in the holidays. This is a lot to do with it, okay? Watching a 90-year-old woman unwrap a present for 5.5 hours is, and everyone is just, it's not about the presents, y'all, okay? My mother thinks it's about presents and trinkets and crap, but it's not. And then she says it's all about Jesus, but maybe it's not really either. What is Christmas about? It's about whatever you want it to be about. And there is no wrong answer, because if your family, your core family, if you want to do that, like my mother did, that was her Christmas. That's okay. And although I seriously despise all of it, that's what she wanted. It made her happy, Now I get to be the mother and I get to choose. We're not doing that. This is what I'm going to teach my children. So, you don't have to do what other people do. There is no wrong, there is no right. It's about traditions, What are the traditions that you do? Do you decorate your tree with your kids way before Christmas? Do you wait till Christmas Eve? I've never had a real Christmas tree. I've always had the plastic ones, And I kind of think this year we are going to get a real tree. I have cats, and I think I'm going to probably put the tree up like closer to Christmas time, not like, it's like the week after Thanksgiving right now. I think